Hello, everyone. My name is Eddie Young, and I serve Fort Mill High School as our career development facilitator. Tonight, we are continuing our Dream December presentation, and we have a great man that I've had the pleasure of knowing for not very long, but I tell you, I have learned so much from him already. We're talking about Mr. Bobby Steiner from the Steiner Executive Search Group. Mr. Steiner, thank you once again for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, I tell you what, we have a great presentation lined up for you all. He has a wealth of knowledge and great information about not just how to find the right career for you, but what little skills and tips you need in order to make yourself stand out. So as you're watching, if you have any questions, any comments, feel free to put them in the chat box. We will make sure to get to them. Mr. Steiner has a great presentation that we are just dying to get to. But before we do that, Mr. Steiner, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely. First and foremost, thanks again for having me. And this is something I'm really passionate about. Not only, post high school, but post any sort of education. Right. I grew up in upstate New York. Went to school in New York, and then years ago transferred down here to Charlotte, North Carolina, and I've been here around 20 years or so. I own my own business. I've been in the recruiting business 17 years, and I think the uniqueness of that is I've worked both on the agency side of the business as well as the corporate side for Bank of America. So I understand the intricacies of how a big company functions, how they think, but I also know from the agency side where you're laser focused on finding talent, what clients and companies look for. Okay. I've been in Fort Mill for over 10 years. I've got 2 children in the Fort Mill School District, my daughter Kennedy, my son Devin, and we're rooted here. My kind of approach to recruiting in my business, just so everybody knows, it's pretty straightforward stuff. I'm not going to sugarcoat things for you. I'm going to tell you how it is. I have enough experience in the real world, and I think direct and an honest approach is very critical to this process that everyone's going to go through post high school. And I think I would be doing everybody a disservice if I was just selling all the good stuff and telling you all the good things that happens after school. So I have a pretty candid approach in the way I go about business and what we're going to talk about this evening.
I tell you, honesty is the best policy. So I tell you what, let's go ahead. Let's jump into it. I have your presentation ready if you are.
Absolutely. One thing I flew over here, and we'll touch on it later, is I actually went to St. Bonaventure University post high school. I grew up in upstate New York. I actually applied to one school, and the school I wanted to go to of choice was St. Bonaventure. Then I did after 1-year transfer. But we will talk about that later on the deck about kind of what happens, because life is going to throw you some curveballs, right? So be prepared for change. And I'm one of those examples. But slide 2, this is a quote I have on my website. This is something I think is very important. And this is a quote by Henry Hines. And he quoted, "To do a common thing uncommonly well brings success." So the likelihood of any of us inventing the new iPad or being the founder of Facebook, not to say it's not possible, but for 99% of folks, you're not going to come out with the newest invention. But what Heinz did is he made something simple. He made ketchup. But you know what he did? He made the best darn ketchup on the planet. Very simple in his approach, but you have to master your talents. You have to be focused on what you do and be great at it, right? I always say double down on what you're good at and what you enjoy doing, and good things will happen, right? So you don't have to be the next inventor in life. You don't have to come up with the next new idea. Just do a common thing, whatever that may be, and be great at it. Example, education, healthcare. Be the best doctor you can be. Be the best teacher you can be. Be the best student you can be, right? And I think that's what resonates with me with that quote. And I think that's critical, regardless of what stage in life you're at, right? Whether you're, in high school, you're in college, you're, 50, 60 years old. I think that's very important to live by as it relates to a career. Next, possible paths. This is where it gets interesting, folks. We all heard about the traditional path of, hey, post high school, yes, we all should go on, or a good suggestion would be to get a 4-year degree. That has changed drastically over the past 5 to 10 years, okay? There is no traditional path, and we've seen a diminishing return on your traditional 4-year degree. It's being commoditized, right? Where 60% of folks have that piece of paper, have that ticket. And I call it a ticket because that's really essentially what it is. And not all jobs require that. Even today in the corporate world, we're starting to see that 4-year degrees are preferred, not required. 15 years ago when I started my career in recruiting, plus it would be almost mandated in some cases. It wouldn't be mandated from what university or the reputation of the school, but it would say, hey, a degree is required for this particular position. We're starting to see a shift. Okay. And to that point, the reputation and the status and the cost in which you pay has zero influence on your success after you get out. Okay. Nor do employers care essentially where you went to school. I've recruited for almost 20 years now, and I haven't had one client ever say, Mr. Steiner, I need someone who's graduated from Chapel Hill. I need someone who's graduated from USC. That simply doesn't happen in the real world. Okay. So it's really black and white. If they require a degree, and that's an if, right? They will essentially say degree or no degree. Okay. And that's important to know, because when you commoditize something, it's to the masses. And I think, again, it's a great thing. It's a great path for a lot of people, but people need to understand, students need to understand, parents need to understand that is not the only path to success. And I think there's a lot of example with Bill Gates and the founder of Facebook and those types of stories, right? But there are other paths to success. And simply because you went on to the traditional 4-year degree path does not dictate and is an indicator of your future success. It just simply isn't.
Mr. Steiner, one thing that I have found is we have become very locked in on that 4-year degree and saying that this is it, this is the only thing. So I'm so glad to hear you say that there are different ways of getting to it. One thing that I like to tell my students when I'm meeting with them is, college is not the end all destination. If we want to take a trip to California, California is the destination, but there's lots of different vehicles of getting there, and college is a vehicle. We can choose to take it or not.
Correct. And think about the evolution of your life, right? Until 18 to 20, you attend high school, you've got this 4-year pocket, right? That's a small 4-year pocket of your evolution, right? Your career is made up of 30 to 40 years typically, right? So it's a small part of your life. It's an important part of your life, and you should evaluate and explore. But the reason I put that the number one bullet is because I think that's the traditional thinking, right? But there's the thinking and strategy has changed drastically. We'll get into some of those points later. So excellent point. And listen, my son's a sophomore. I've been around friends and family who have kids going into school, who've attended college. And this is a key point. In the real world, simply, it does not matter where your sister, your aunt, your uncle, your mother or father went to school. I've never once had anybody bring that up in an interview. It's just not important. I know it's important to the family bubble, right? And everybody can beat their chest. Hey, we have family members. That's great to have the legacy, right? But it has no bearing on an employer of, quite frankly, what you did in high school, right? But what family members and the legacy that you left behind in college or continued education, right? It's what you do with that, right? When you get to that stop, how do you leverage what you know and what you've learned and apply that? And we'll get to that as well about hard work, because there's just no substitute for that. The next bullet, Mr. Young, the 2-year college degree is a great option too. It's a great option for a lot of folks, or community college, right? Because traditionally those core courses are the same. Right. I'm an example.
Right.
When I went to school, you got to take sociology, psychology, some of these classes. Those are core prerequisite courses, right? They're traditionally the same. And from a finance perspective, if you go to a 2-year community college, you get a bigger bang for your buck. Some people may know this, some people may not. The example, the 3.5 to 0.5 rule, 3.5 years of your collegiate career. If you go that traditional, and nobody typically goes traditional, makes it out one school, one time, 4 years with no hiccups, no bumps, no changes, right?
Right.
If you attend a school for 3.5 years, right? Let's just call it University of South Carolina. And then you transfer mid-year to Harvard. Your degree is going to say Harvard on it. No employer will take a look back and say, hey, well, which semesters did you go to USC and which semesters did you go to Harvard? Your diploma, your degree is obtained and certified by the institution in which your last semester you attended. And no employer will inquire about those previous steps. It may come up in typical dialogue, and you may want to volunteer that information. But a degree is contingent upon your last semester, right? And things transfer and they apply, and there's a lot of different ways that you can serpentine through that. But I think that's important, that folks need to understand the economics of it, right? Because a traditional 4-year school is quite expensive. And there's ways to carve out and provide students some other option than that traditional path, as we were referring to earlier.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. Like I said, the great thing about the 2-year schools is, you like you said, you save a pretty penny. Having spoken with a lot of our freshmen in our high school 101 course, I'll have them do some really quick math, and there's some institutions, some in North and South Carolina, that are very popular, and I'll say, okay, well, the tuition, room, and board there is $60,000 for 1 year. You multiply that by 4, and now you have $240,000. And the question I ask is, if I were to give you $240,000 right now, what would you be able to do? And the kids are very honest, well, most of the time they're honest. They're going to say things like, well, I'd invest some money, or I buy my mom a house or something. I'm still waiting on the day when someone says, I'm going to go buy a PS5, because I know that's out there.
It's tough, because I think that jump from high school to college, is the finance part is a big thing of it, right? And to understand the return on investment is critical. And there's no guarantee, right? There's no guarantee that what you put into something is what you're going to get out of it. And actually, we talked about this earlier. Colleges kind of set the fees, right? They set them. They are what they are, and if you're going to attend it, you're going to pay. And you can't go in there and wheel and deal and negotiate. Now, there's grants and there's ways to get relief and those types of things and financial assistance, but they set the prices and they determine the market. Okay, if you're willing to play by their rules, you have to play by their rules, right? So that's the challenge with a traditional 4-year school. And they're great. Listen, I went to a 4-year school. I transferred. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a great ticket in. I call it an at-bat. Some positions in America that you'll have to apply to, they will say required a 4-year degree. But that is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller, because people know that is not a tool of success. It's a great foundation, but it's not going to be indicative of where you can go in your career, right? So I think that's important. And we get to the next point, entrepreneurship, huge right now with the tools and the internet and the things that are out there, or a business partnership where you partner with somebody. The cost of entry today in entrepreneurship or small business is so much lower than it was before. Think
Absolutely.
about retail, right? If you had retail clothes and you want to open a clothing store, and you love, you want to open a female store, and you love dresses and the boutique nature of it, you'd have to open a retail store, sign a 3-year lease, get all the internet, the computers, the insurances. Now you can literally open an online store for under $100, right?
Exactly.
That's just different than it was when we were in school, when I attended school. And the cost of entry is important, because that was a barrier, right? A barrier of entry. Not a lot of folks had the $250,000, $300,000 to say, let's take that risk on to open a boutique. So there's alternative options for entrepreneurship, right? And hey, some people may go to a 2-year school, try entrepreneurship, then attend a 4-year school. You might attend a 4-year school, then open your own business, right? This is not a direct line of sight path. And we'll drive that home throughout the conversation today.
And what I love about, even just from looking at the different bullet points, is there are lots of combinations that we could work. Think about it here. Let's say that they were to attend a 2-year school, transfer to a 4-year school, and the whole time they're working in entrepreneurial, they're being an entrepreneurial, on the side as well. So there's lots of different options that our students have that are available to them.
Absolutely. I find it fascinating when I speak to junior candidates throughout my career. We've done some junior positions. And when you speak to folks maybe 3 to 5 years out of school, and they tell you, hey, when I was in high school, I owned a landscape business, right?
Right.
That's just the effort. You can just tell that's a DNA of a person. You know what? I'm going to take some risks. And there's going to be risk along the way. They can be calculated risks. Let's not off the deep end, but you can think through it, listen, do your research, and calculate your risks, right? But like you had mentioned, running parallel paths, right? You can go to school and own your own business, or do something on the side, or freelance, right? That's big in marketing, freelance in marketing, where they're doing, digital websites or digital design or photography, and even trade schools and craftsmanship. That's a lost art. Building homes today is at an all-time high. Rates are low. building is high. They can't find the tradesmen to do the work. They can't find masonry, brick people, painters, plumbers. That's in high demand today. So what's to say you're not going to open an electrical contractor business? That's huge. And craftsmanship, if you want to design a coffee table, pop it on Etsy today and sell it, right? So you are an entrepreneur in essence, and the cost of entry within that segment today is lower than it's ever been. So again, simultaneous parallel paths, 4-year degree, 2-year degree. While you do that, go to a 2-year school, jump out and try that. Go to a 4-year school, then do that, or continue education, do an MBA. There's so many things you can do, but I think it's important to know that you got to put your due diligence in, right? You've got to do your work. You got to take risks. You got to dig in. You have to ask questions, and you have to go to the professionals who live in those trades. So military service is another great option. They pay you to attend military school, right? And there's a lot of options there where you're getting paid in return. What I will say about that is if you do go that path, not only from a finance perspective, which is a huge plus, but the general character of a person, that is important. And we'll touch on that later as well. Character means something in business, okay? In recruiting, it means something. There's value in that. You can have all the tools in the chest, but if you lack character, typically you'll be passed over. And I think the military segment is huge because we know the types of people that go down that path and the integrity of those individuals. And from a recruiting perspective, it's fantastic. It's fantastic. It's high integrity, typically high character, and that's intrinsically wired to those individuals. So that's another path as well.
That's right.
And they're paying you essentially to attend the service.
And ladies and gentlemen, as you're watching this, if you have any questions about the military, we had a really good session with about 5 military recruiters a couple weeks ago. So you feel free to go, not right now, but go and check that out in a little bit as soon as you get done watching this one.
Yeah, and something we touched on too from Roy Williams at Chapel Hill, the basketball coach there for years. He flat out refuses to sign anyone to his team who is not a person of character. He goes, I'll take a person who is little short on ability, right? The tools that you bring to the table and academics, but I will not take anyone who is short on character. And that's important. Some of those softer skills, I know you had a seminar and a session on some of those soft skills. We'll cover some of those as well. But character plays a big part in anything you do, whether it's in high school, post high school, or in your career. And that is something that I can't emphasize enough because that bleeds through, right? People can sense that by your actions, your words, your disposition, your heart, your integrity, some of those traits and attributes that all employers look for. I think that's important. And the last bullet, Mr. Young, the why. If you go down any of these paths, you need to be able to articulate why you picked it. It could change. Right. We talked about that. But you have to believe in, okay, there's got to be, I'm doing this, this is why. You need to be able to communicate that over and over again. If a stranger walked up on the street and said, hey, why did you choose to go to community college here in Charlotte? You should be able to articulate that immediately with great clarity and color, okay? You have to feel it. You got to feel it in your bones, and you jump in with 2 feet, right? It could change. You could go there for a semester, not like it, to make a transfer, right? But you've got to be dedicated to the path in which you chose for yourself, right? And that is a path that you should choose for yourself in collaboration with your parents. But make no mistake about it. Post high school, you're an adult. Put your big boy pants on, for lack of a better term, and you have to start making decisions about your future and the path in which you want to take.
Absolutely true. This is so true. Thank you.
And it goes back to a mindset. The next slide. No one's ready for a thing until he or she believes it. And I'm passionate about this stuff because I live it, but I believe it. I burn it. The state of mind must be belief, not mere hope and wish. It's great to have hope and wish for things, but you have to believe in your bones that this is what you're meant to do. And if you don't believe that, you can make a change. And we'll get into those changes, right? Not mere hope or wish. Open-mindedness is essential. Be open. Take risks. Don't say, hey, I've heard about this 4-year degree going to Clemson since I was an infant, and that's the only path I can take. I'm born to be a business person, and that may not detour because it may. So be open to things. Open-mindedness is essential for that belief. Closed minds do not inspire faith, courage, or that belief. Okay. And I think that's important for, yes, high school graduates, but any professional. You have to dive in. And I tell candidates when I recruit them, I say, hey, listen, if don't take this opportunity if you have 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Let's find another candidate, another professional who's diving into it, right? I think it's so hard when there's just so much hesitation. You can have some hesitation, but you have to believe that this is the path that you want to take. And again, 30, 60, 100 days in, 6 months in, you may change that path, but you have to go in it with good intentions, wholeheartedly, with a strong belief. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. There has to be a dedication. There has to be a dedication to what you're doing. And that, I believe, is something that we all as a culture and as a society, sometimes we feel like we can just get in and out of things very quickly. But when we're thinking about your career, your future, you have to be able to dedicate to something. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. Before you take an opportunity away from someone who absolutely wants to be there, make sure you're all in.
Absolutely. And it may change. It may be a plan. And this is perfectly fine too. So you know what? I'm going to try community college out for 2 semesters, but I'm going in. I'm going to learn it. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see how I like it. After those 2 semesters, you may say, you know what? I'm ready to go to a 4-year school. Or you may say, I want to go another 2 years here. I really enjoy it. But you have to go in it with 2 feet in. Yes, it can change. But I think dedicate yourself. Yes, you're going to have some bumps along the way. You can make changes. Some things are locked in stone, and we're going to get that to the next slide. But I think, it's important to have conviction. And that goes back to that articulation. Be confident in your choices, right? Once you make that, be confident in it, set some goals, and dig in. They can be short-term goals, right? You don't have to look out 12, 24 months. Set a quarterly goal or a semester goal. It may be to make certain grades in academically. It may be join some club sports, whatever it may be. But I think, you've got to have good faith going into it and be behind it, right? And especially, let's be honest, if your parents are financing it, you owe them that approach, right? If they're going to,
at a bare minimum,
in the future, you owe it to your family to give it your best effort. And you know what? Let the chips fall where they may. But you got to go in it with the right mindset. The DETOUR. This is essential. We've talked about this at a high level. The traditional path, 4-year school, same school, 8 semesters, graduate, you're out, you get a job, you internship your last year, the company signs you, and life is beautiful, and you spend a 20-year career there. That does not happen today. It just simply does not. So prepare for that. And parents' responsibility, it's no longer your responsibility post-high school to watch over your child's daily activity. Okay, when they go to school, continued education, you can't manage their day-to-day. You can't set their alarm for them. They got to show up. And that's, we talk about a 4-year or a 2-year, say they're local and they go to community school, they're in charge. You can't just wake them up every morning and walk them out or give them a ride. They have to figure it out. So it's time for parents to let their eagles soar, right? They're going to make mistakes. They're going to miss an exam. They're not going to study. They're going to get a bad grade on an assessment or an exam, but you can't micromanage them at this stage. We're talking about 19, 20, 21-year-olds, right? You got to let them go. And I think that's important that the child is ready to talk about that. We're not talking about children anymore. These folks are adults. They can drive, right? So parents have to loosen that up and, again, let their ego soar. But they also have to support and encourage different paths, right? Regardless of what your ideals tell you. I'd love for my son to, run track in college and go to a 4-year school. That would make me proud. But you know what? If he graduated from Fort Mill High School and said, Dad, I want to open a business. I want to be an entrepreneur like you. I want to open X, Y, and that's what he's going to do. And I'm going to be there to support it, right? And that is so important for parents. And it can be hard sometimes because they have this vision, right, of your little baby, of what this person can be. And I believe it. I went to a 4-year school. I did this. I want what's best for my child. And everybody does. No doubt about it, Mr. Young. Everybody wants the best. But I think we do our children a disservice by not listening to them directly, hearing their concerns, and maybe being a little more open than we would have been maybe 10 years ago, let's say, right?
Mr. Steiner, I will say everything you're saying is gospel truth. Before working at Fort Mill High School, I worked at a couple different universities in housing and residence life, and it was part of my responsibility during freshman orientation to speak to our parents and kind of open that door towards the letting the child go piece. And something as simple as saying, you know, when your child is here for that first night by themselves, you're going to have to trust that they're going to make good decisions. And the fear that came over some of their faces of like, wow, they're really going away. How can our parents begin that process now?
That's a phenomenal question. I think you have to build trust. You have to build some of those intangible skills of resourcefulness, loyalty, character, network, people. Show me your friends, I'll show you my future, kind of thing, right?
Right.
Have a good circle of friends, a good supporting cast, whether it's your parents, your aunts and uncles, friends, or family. I think that's critical, because when they get off on this island, they may want to call mom and say, Mom, man, I'm really struggling here. I need my blankie, right? They may want to call a friend. They may want to call Uncle Joe, right? So they need a supporting cast that's bigger than their nucleus. And it could be friends in the outer circle. I think that helps, where they can just talk and feel close to home. I think from a preparing standpoint, it's tough now with COVID. It is. That presents some different challenges, right? Because they're not as independent as they could be, right? Because they can't travel on their own, cut them loose on vacation on their own, maybe a job they can't attend today because of COVID, right? But I think in traditional, junior and senior year, let them fly a little sooner. Give them a little longer leash, right? Maybe have that dialogue and let them take on a few more risks, right, on their own early on. Be there beside them. But I think the earlier you can, I'll go into this in a minute about the research piece of things, but their role, the more they dig in, the more they research, the more they inquire about anything, whether it's school or, one of their hobbies. I think that natural curiosity will help them and put them in a position. But when it comes to, getting them out there, helping with that transition, I think a supporting cast and a nucleus outside your home is huge for you.
That's great. Thank you. That gives me good information as my children get older. So thank you.
Well, and teachers and coaches, I know from playing sports, sporting coaches, people stay close to their high school coaches, and having the ability to shoot a text off or when they first go out there. I mean, it's not an easy transition, but it's a togetherness, right? Yes, let your ego soar. That doesn't mean you can't coach them up a little bit and be there for them and lean on them. They just have to have that ability to make decisions and be accountable for their actions, right? Show up. Let's start with things that are simple. Show up to class, attend school, attend your academics, attend your job, show up for your internship, be prepared for your internship.
Yes.
Dress in the right attire for your internship. Those things absolutely falls on their shoulders. And hey, sometimes you got to coach them up on it, right? And you coach them up. So hopefully that answers that. Students, big one. No plan is set in stone. We talked about this. You can pivot anytime. Yes, if you enroll into a school, there is a cost for a semester. But typically it's a semester-based enrollment, right? It could potentially be a year or some type of educational program that goes up to a year. But guess what? That is a temporary agreement. There is nothing finalized for year after year after year. I am the example. I applied to St. Bonaventure University. I got into St. Bonaventure University. I went there for 2 semesters, and probably midway through my first semester, I didn't feel it. Like something just wasn't what I expected my post-high school career to feel like. And I took action. I said, what would my alternatives be? And I didn't check with my parents. I called a few friends, and it was either going to be Syracuse University or the University of Buffalo. And a few people I went to high school with were at University of Buffalo. So I shot them an email. I took it upon myself to shoot an email off and said, hey, how do you like the school? And it happened to be a few hours away. I went there, and I went back to my parents and said, I want to transfer. I want to transfer to University of Buffalo. I'm just not feeling that St. Bonaventure University is the place that I'm supposed to, me personally, call home for the next 4 years. For some people, it's great. For me, it just wasn't the right recipe. right? And my parents supported that change. But I'm a prime example of make a pivot. Your gut is typically right. And yes, there are
Right.
short-term marriages here. And when the money comes out and you're paying for it, yes, you have that short-term marriage, but it is not a long-term marriage, right? The institution you can part ways with. And if it's not an institution, it's a program. Say you're going into NASCAR and you're going to their mechanic school. Yeah, you can go for a semester and then pivot away from that and make a change. And just don't be afraid. Don't worry about, well, what are my parents going to think? What will my brothers and sisters think about this situation? It's time to do you. And you do everybody a disservice if you're not happy, right?
True.
And I think
That's absolutely true.
And you own your path. No one else does. Your parents can coach you up on it. Your brother and sisters can support you. Your aunts and uncle and grandparents can be there alongside of you. But make no mistake about it. After high school, it's your path to own. And if you don't love what you're doing, make the change and don't be afraid to make that change, right? And I think that take action piece, don't complain. Take some action, right? With the tools you have in front of you today with research and the ability to network and meet people and expand your network, you need to put in the time and don't worry about what others think about it. Be honest with yourself. It starts there, right? Because I've met people in my circle who've attended school and it wasn't what they felt was right for them, the university, and they pivoted and they made a change. So I think understanding that now is going to help a student out there be like, you know what? That Bobby was right. I'm just not feeling the decision I made. And that's okay. Maybe it helps a parent out there say, you know what? I just received 3 calls and three calls this week about my child, my son or daughter not being happy where he or she is. And now they're a little more prepared to say, you know what? This is more traditional today. There's more of this going on, or taking a semester off, potentially traveling, or taking a break, calling a timeout, reevaluating, and getting back in. And I think it's important for both parents and students to understand not only those points, but also understand each other's perspective, right? Where's my mom and dad coming from, right? I understand what they're coming from. I get it, And then the parents say, okay, I really got to listen to my child a little closely. I don't think this is going to work out for him or her, and I got to help figure this out again, right? And then we'll start, going to the next slide talking about who's doing what roles, right? But any questions on your screen yet that we should answer or tackle?
No, no questions, but I do want to make a comment. We've talked about pivoting as far as being able to change from, one school to the next, or one career interest to the next. Even within that, as you kind of alluded to this as well, personally, I changed my major in undergrad about 3 times. And I think sometimes we have, just because you say you want to be a computer programmer in 7th grade doesn't mean that that's actually what you're going to end up being. And that's okay. You don't have to stay locked into something, because like you said, if you're not feeling it, you're just not feeling it. And there's no reason to keep pushing and pursuing something that ultimately is not going to make you happy.
Great point. And that really transitions into the next slide. Do not wait. There's no time too soon to start thinking about this stuff. Junior, senior year, let's go. Let's kick it into gear. Let's explore some things. Let's have some conversations, maybe with some professionals in this space, right? Research those schools, right? Research what my options are. Be very tactical about this, but do not rely on your parents. It's not your parents' job to do the legwork for you. The power of the internet today and your phones and your mobile devices, you can do any research you want in any institution, any furthering your continuing education, any university, any 2-year school, any academic program out there. You have those resources. And to that,
absolutely.
If you walk away with nothing from this in one bit, it's this note: skills assessment. Know what you're good at. Know what you're passionate about. If you struggle and you're not passionate about reading or writing or English, don't become an author. If you don't like mathematics and physics, may not be a good idea to be an engineer. And that's okay. You may have thought this, but if you struggle in courses or you're not excited about it, that's where that pivot comes in and you change your major. You think you go into school, you're going to be a computer programmer, and you take a couple business classes and be like, you know what? I want to become an entrepreneur. That's just the reality. And I have to drive this home. Double down on what you're good at. Double down on it. And what you enjoy doing, because if you enjoy doing it, and you double down on your skills, you'll be successful. I will tell you that the one challenge is if you really want to do something and you're not very good at it, right? That tells me, right, you can still do that. Say you want to become a computer programmer, but you're a C student in computer programming in every course across the board, right? Then you're just going to have to work a little bit harder, and you're going to have to hustle a little bit harder, and you can still break through those barriers. But I believe people are intrinsically wired a certain way, and when they get to that point, you can maneuver and shift a little bit, but why not double down on what you're good at and what you enjoy doing? And also know what you don't enjoy doing. Right? If you don't enjoy certain topics, subjects, stay away from them. You have that ability to do that. Some schools will throw some prerequisites at you and some things you have to take, and I get that. But know as you evolve, this goes for the parents too. If you don't like doing something in your job, stay away from the jobs that have that component in it, right? And it's okay. I don't like to do this. In the recruiting world, I don't love sending out a bunch of emails every day. I don't. I like negotiating, recruiting, talking to companies, talking to candidates. I don't really love the tactical part of recruiting, right? So I know kind of what I love to do and what I don't like to do at the same time. Okay. And I think that's an important piece. Submitting applications, get on it. It's not your job. And correct me if I'm wrong. Students have the ability to do a combined application. Is that correct? For schools?
Yes, sir. There are a lot of schools that are using the Common app or the Coalition app, which allow you to submit basically a similar application to many different institutions.
Gotcha. And with that, talk to former students or family members or friends of family members about schools that they have attended and or professions that you might be interested in. If you want to be an accountant, very easy to get in accounting. People like to talk about themselves. I could talk all day about recruiting and me, right? And I'm happy to discuss that. And people like to talk about themselves so they can learn through the lens of other people, okay? And I think that's important. Expand your network, and the tools that are out there today in professional networking are very robust, right? And I think you have to start leveraging them. It may be a little scary for a high school student, but as you go through high school, LinkedIn is a great tool. We'll touch on that. It's a professional social media platform, and you can find anybody, anywhere, at any time. And if most people are willing to lend a hand and help anybody out who shows a sincere interest in what they do, right? And people love talking about themselves. So use that to learn. But also know your financial options, overall costs, grants, loans, and resources about the commitment you're going to make, right? There is a financial component to all this, regardless it's a 2-year, 4-year, continued education, specialized tradesman schools. There's a cost. So just know those. And that's important. And have that conversation with the parents. And I think that's, again, parents, don't be the pilot. The student child is the pilot, okay? Personally, I believe they should have a seat in the back of the plane or mid-row, but they can be co-pilot. They can be co-pilot if they're financing some of it. But I think it's so important to empower your child, right? I say child but they're really adults, right? They're children and adults at the same time. They're still your child, but they're adult. And I say, don't be a pilot. Let them guide. Be there at their hip and their shoulder, walking hand in hand with them. But don't get lead from in front of them. I think that's a mistake that a lot of parents make. Support the process, navigating all the options that are out there. And we've already covered a lot of those. And there's a lot of options. Listen, one-on-one discussions with your child to be clear and concise about your roles, right? If the finance is a piece of it, how much finance do we have? If I go to grad school, is that going to be a component? What's my portion to pick up the tab? What happens if I want to go locally to Charlotte? Do I stay at home or do I stay on campus, right?
Right.
Who's making these decisions, right? What is your role on that next chapter, okay? And that needs to be discussed of expectations. I guess it's really setting expectations, right? And the student expectations, right?
That's exactly what I was going to say is when you set expectations, they're easier to be met. But unstated expectations are very rarely, if ever, met. So that one-on-one conversation piece is really important. But I also want to say each side has to be able to communicate freely. I know sometimes students feel a little bit of pressure, not because they don't know what to say, is they have this feeling that their parents will not listen to them no matter what they say. So there has to be an environment created where students feel comfortable expressing their true feelings to their parents.
Without question. And I was an example of that, right? I had to pick up the phone in my dorm room at St. Bonaventure University and call both my parents and say, I made a mistake. I want to transfer. That's a tough call to make, no doubt about it. And I think, I knew my parents would understand, like, hey, if it doesn't work out, it's okay, right? I knew they would understand that. And I think that next point, that collaboration point, be careful how much influencing you do as a parent. Trust me, you can steer your child in the direction in which you want them to if you press too hard. Let me tell you, you're a 30, 40-year-old individual, right? You can absolutely guide and steer a little bit too hard, a little bit too direct, a little too firmly if you press them right into a corner. And I caution parents not to do that. I know an example of that today where it was pushed and guided to go to this university. It was just the way it was going to be. Their family went there, the cousins, the sisters, you got to do it. And I just felt the hesitation from the student of, I don't know if this is right. And guess what? Transfer after the first semester. And wow. I think just be careful how you press and guide and influence that. I think that's important, right? You can influence, but just don't put the full court press. I think you'll do yourself a disservice with your child. So collaborate with them to that point. The fun or not the fun, that's a one-on-one conversation. I'm staying away from it. Every situation is different. If you want access to funds, there's the ability to get that. That's what I will leave with students. There's alternative ways to find funding, fill out applications, financial aid, support to get to where you want to go. And that 2-year community college or 2-year school is a great option to cut costs. And then as you go up, I believe you can borrow more. I'm not a professional with finance, but I believe as your years throughout college goes, junior and senior, you can start to borrow more money. And of course, grad school, you can borrow more as well. But I will say, you have to have those expectations up front, right? The parent and the child, where is the funding coming from? And let's face it, that's at the center of the conversation. But that's something that it's not for anybody outside the bubble to discuss. It's kind of inside that nucleus, right? With the parents. I mean, wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And that's another potentially tough conversation, but it is an absolutely necessary conversation. When I went to undergrad way back in yesteryear, my parents, they had very little conversations with me about funds. They just told me, we got it. And then after I graduated from undergrad and I worked a year, I said, I'm thinking about going back to graduate school. And my father quickly told me, your mom and I took care of one, you got everything else.
Absolutely. And I had the expectation to that point is my parents were divorced and it was a third, a third, a third. That's the way it was split. Dad, you pay a third. Mom, you pay a third. Bobby, you pick up a third of the tab. And that was the expectation that was set. So there was great clarity of what those expectations were. And that, of course, hey, make a passing grade or we're going to reevaluate that. And that's perfectly okay, too, for parents to do. But again, it goes to that relationship, the collaboration, and the discussion early on. If you wait until he or she is already at school, it's too late. It's just too late. Or continued education or in specialty school, it's too late. You can still catch up, but to that earlier question, why wait? Now is the time. I mean, we're so close to graduation, especially if your student's a senior. Juniors have a little more time to select, but if you're a senior, you're approaching, go time for, hey, what my next step is post high school. And the next slide, what businesses, CEO leaders want, this is where my specialty is, right? I had to bridge the gap today between high school education, continuing education, and now what does corporate America want? And this I know well, and this I'm passionate about as well. A college degree or any specialized training owes you nothing. Students, you need to know this. This is a piece of paper. You walk in, it maybe gets you a seat at the table, but it will not dictate success. It's literally a ticket in, and you need to find a way in your career to separate yourself from the pack. Think about this. The analytics, maybe 55, 60% with a 4-year degree. Let's focus back on that 4-year degree. Okay. Do you know how many students that is graduating per year in the United States with a bachelor degree? What makes you different? What makes you that ace? What makes you more attractive to an employee? Right? What are some of the softer skills? Because if everybody's walking out with the same piece of paper, maybe GPA is slightly different, but okay. What separates you? What makes you different? What makes you shine? Right? You need to know that. Same as a 2-year professional, because some roles you'll be competing against experienced professionals You'll be competing against folks with 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, internships, non-internships, 2-year degree folks, specialized folks, maybe the CEO's son who wants the job, right?
Mm.
That is more important than that piece of paper. I don't want to take it away from college. It is important. It does show a great path. It does show that you've earned something tangible. You've set a goal, you've achieved that. I don't want to devalue that. But in the market that I live in, after you leave college, it's meaningless in reference to you got a degree, you don't have a degree. Next question, please. And that's the cold, hard truth of how employers look at that.
Wow. I think that's really enlightening for you to share that with us. The value of the degree, I don't want to say it diminishes once you walk across the stage, but it's once again, it reiterates the fact that your college degree may and it may not be a necessary step. Depending upon the field that you're in, you may need that degree, absolutely. But once you have achieved it, you just check the box. It's in. Now, what it will continue to separate you from everyone else with a similar piece of paper.
Absolutely. And that transitions to our next point. I'm telling you, folks, academic A players with no other skills, just crushed it in school. No communication skills, weak on social skills. I will take an average player. My clients will take an average player as it relates to academics and tools with high character, great work ethic, strong communication skills, strong passion over just that prototypical student, just like Roy Williams said. You can have these tools, but your career is more than just having these tools at your disposal or something that you learned. You have to apply that. You have to find a way to be great at whatever path you do. Back to the Heinz quote, right? If you're going to make ketchup, your goal should be the best ketchup out there. If you're going to repair bicycles and you want to, you're a mountain biker, right? And you want to open a bike shop, be the best repair bicycle person in the business or have the best customer service in the business. Differentiate yourself. And soft skills matter big time. In the COVID world and the technology world, I think there is a huge gap on probably all students in general on the social skill side of things. Can your child have an intelligent conversation with a leader at a company? Can they have an intelligent conversation with an entrepreneur? And that is a learned skill. You and I both know that. Some people feel natural about that. And there's ways to help guide that, right? That is going to be important, that you can interact with an adult, with a professional, with a colleague, with an associate, with a friend, and you can articulate these things. That is probably a top 2 component of what we look for in recruiting, right? When you pick up the phone and you talk to somebody, what's their disposition? What's their style? What's their demeanor? How do they communicate? Are they thoughtful? Do they listen? So that is a huge factor. And I think that is a common denominator across the board in any industry at any level. Social skills and communications matter.
The ability to interact with other people and to easily communicate your thoughts and ideas.
It's just critical. Professional media. Now, huge, students, there's a difference between professional social media and social media in general. And I, as a recruiter and any professional, there's a lot of information online and we can find you. Good, bad, or indifferent, we can find what you put out there. If you've got public information out there, it can be found. LinkedIn is the #1 professional tool today. It's a great tool, but it's about your career, your development, where you want to go. Instagram, Snapchat, Facebook, they can be problematic. So you've been warned today, if you're going in for an internship 2 years into school or a trade or going on an interview, and I can pull up your name and there's you at the beach with a beer in your hand doing a pyramid with a bunch of guys. That is not what employers want to see. It's great that you have a social media platform. I would scrub that as you continue on, as you apply. If you've got to be mindful of this stuff. And even if I don't check social media as much on candidates, I know my clients do, because I've had clients respond, hey, this Kelly Smith, I just pulled her up. Can you believe she posted this? That is so critical, that there's eyes out there and you have been warned that those eyes can find you. And if you think, well, you know what? I'm not out of college yet. I'm just in high school. Well, internships start early, right? You should be getting into professional development, separating yourself from the pack earlier, working part-time, learning, being an understudy, doing apprenticeship in the trait in which you want to excel in early on, not just, okay, the day after you graduate. And that's important, and that's on this slide as well. Professionalism, that goes back to the nature of professionalism. Act as if you've been there. Act as if you're already a CPA. Act as if you're already an electrician. Act as if you're already an entrepreneur, right? I had an example, and I made a mistake. Early on in my career, I had a resume. I graduated school. My email address wasn't that professional. That's why I didn't get a call back. It wasn't my first name, last name at Gmail. You can't have bikerbabe@gmail.com on your resume. Okay? Seriously, that's just the nature of it. And it's those little things where I actually got a call. I said, why didn't I get a call about this internship, this opportunity? Well, the hiring manager wasn't impressed with your email address, right? The way I left it out there. That's a mistake that I made. But I think a lot of students can relate to that. That goes back to email addresses, social media. Just be wary of what's tangible and visible out there as you continue on your career path. Take risks. I believe, number one, the future belongs to the risk takers, right? If you're just looking for security, that's okay. But I believe take those risks. They can be measured risks, Mr. Young. They can be measured, right? You do your due diligence, you do your research. Let's not be reckless about this, right? Let's not on week one at Clemson be like, I'm out of school now. I don't like it here, right? You've got to be thoughtful about this stuff, right? You've got to put in your time and do your due diligence. But also, I will say resourcefulness and street smarts. How do you operate in the gray? Can you figure it out? Are there tools out there where you can dive in and learn something new? If it's not there in front of you, black and white, can you navigate that gray sea? Companies and CEOs want people who are resourceful, that can just figure it out, right? And they don't need some of that hand-holding. That goes back to letting your ego soar. Let's go. It's time. There's enough tools out there today where you can make the phone call, send the email out, or do the research. And companies love candidates that possess all these skills, okay? Does that resonate with you, Mr. Young?
You know, the ability to, like you said, figure it out speaks volumes, because quite frankly, your supervisor is not paying you to ask them how to figure out the problem. Your supervisor wants you to figure out the answer to the problem. So if the reports aren't adding up, they're expecting you to figure out why. If we have more merchandise than we have orders, your supervisor is expecting you to figure out the solution and the answer. So the ability to think just a few steps more and say, this is why this is not right. Here's how we could possibly fix this. And I guarantee you, no matter what job you do, no matter what career you're in, you will be solving some type of problem.
Without question. You know what's funny about every bullet we just read? Not one of them has to do with a 4-year degree. Not one of them. You can do any of these skills at any level in your career, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years out. These are tangible skills, intangible soft skills that all companies want. So when you look at all of this, and I came up with this as I'm thinking about what do my clients want? What do they look for? This is what they look for. And not one of this is indicative of the piece of paper, the certification.
Wow.
It's not. It's the well-roundedness of an individual, right? And strong and steady markets. Now, this is interesting because guess what? This changes, right? This changes with time. I know some of these areas, and I just know engineering is a high demand industry. It just really is in the U.S. General business, marketing, and finance. There's always going to be, for business owners, entrepreneurs, there's always going to be marketing and finance. That's kind of steadfast. What I'm passionate about, we all know, is digital, mobile, and e-commerce, right? Unfortunately, JCPenney's, Kmart, these stores are going down. And they're going down for one reason. Brick and mortar stores are going away. They just are. And I think we're going to see a continued removal from that. But also the small business side of things, like the Etsy platform, where you can purchase on goods from an entrepreneur, and Amazon and some of these other things. They're just ease of use. So the shock and awe part of e-commerce and mobile is here with banking. I think bank branches will start to limit themselves as well with mobile deposit and those types of things. But anything digital, mobile, or e-commerce centric, count on that for the next 20 years. That is a safe industry, safe segment to go in. Education and healthcare, those are kind of your staples, right? They're not going anywhere. They are always nurses. Since I've recruited, nurses have always been in high demand, right? Now think about today with COVID, right? Of what's going to happen with the industry, just in general. The dual threat, the engineering with an MBA. And let me break this down for some students who are listening. Engineering would be, let's call it the iPhone. It's the ability to make this device, right? You create the iPhone. The MBA is the business side of things. How do you market it? How do you position it? Who's your customer segment? It's your ability to understand the technical side, but then you flip it to how did the business run, right? You're not making the widget. In engineering, you might be making and designing the widget, but how are you going to market? How do you decide the margins, the market segmentation? That is huge demand today. If you can understand, and it may not be engineering with an MBA or engineering with business, but understanding how the product is made, right? The engineering side, but then how to go to market with that product. A lot of clients look for that today because it's that balance between the yin and yang, the technical and business. Technology is always high demand. We know what we do with offshoring and outsourcing on the technical side of business. There's a lot of that today. That takes people who are heads down, very focused, very analytical. That takes a certain mindset, but that is always in high demand. It's been in high demand for 20 years, and that's not going away. I think the biggest opportunity is probably small business owners and entrepreneurs today because of that cost of entry. I think, again, the cost of entry to owning your own business tends to be, it is much lower than it was historically, but it's minimal today with the e-commerce, digital, and mobile applications, especially if you fall in that service arena or product arena in that segment, right? And then those tradespeople, right now, can't find someone to put concrete in your driveway because the demand is so high. You can't find a brick mason today. You can't find an electrician today. You can't find a welder today. Go call any home builder and they will tell you they are short on talent, right? And those are hands-on skills, and there's just not enough today. It's supply and demand, and with low mortgage rates, building at an all-time high, housing market being strong, those trades are just booming right now. Again, snapshot today, but common denominator here, Mr. Young, all industry needs aces, period. Our clients hire us not to find someone who can functionally do the job. They hire us to find the best possible candidate for that role. Why are you an ace? What separates you from the top, right? That's the common denominator of the market. And there's always a need for people around their A game. And guess what? If you're an ace, you will be recruited. People will come find you. You'll never have to look for a job again because people who know who you are and how you go about business and those tangible skills, the integrity, the character, the social skills, who you are. If you're an ace, you'll never have to look for a job. I can assure you of that.
One thing my father always told me is good work is rewarded with more work. So when you do things very well, people will find you and they will give you the opportunity to do it again.
Without question. And it's just, think about that in your career. If you're highly sought after because you're an ace, that on all the worries in your life, but you know you are exceptional at what you do, that blanket of security sits over you, right? The problem is a lot of people don't want to do the work. I mean, some people are going to walk away here, and this is just fact. He said some great things. You know, he said, reach out to a few professionals. I want to be an accountant. I want to be a CPA, and maybe I should. They don't take the effort to call a CPA or go to their parents' annual review on their taxes. Say, hey, can I ask you a few questions about what past you did? Like, they know what they need to do. It's the action or inaction that blocks them. And I think that's critical for people to understand that, hey, take those risks, make those calls, and do the activity, right? So I would be pressed that that's a very important key here is to do that. That's what separates, kind of your average to the cream rises to the top.
That's right.
And one of the last slides here, students, remember, this is your life, your career. You own this thing. Can't point fingers anymore because you haven't made it. Your high school chapter is closing, right? The next chapter begins. Listen, nobody cares if you were the star quarterback or the head cheerleader. That game is over. That ship has sailed. It is over. At a interview, they're not going to ask you if you were the starting quarterback for the Fort Mill high school team. They won't. And if you answer that, it's not going to carry any street credit. It doesn't carry any weight. It's a great achievement, But the real world doesn't matter what happened in high school. Okay. What can you do for me tomorrow? It's like a stock. And that's important. I have that down there. Treat yourself like a stock. Invest in yourself. Increase the value of your stock. Increase, you are this bubble. You are the stock. What tools, what characters, what traits do I bring to the table that makes me valuable, that makes me different than somebody else? So I think mentally, if you think like, okay, who would invest in me? How do I invest in myself? And how do I create value? Me, Bobby, me, Ed, how do we go about doing that? Your parents are going to have little influence of what happens next. They just are, right? You're going to decide your continued education, your professional development, what jobs you take. You may bounce ideas off your parents when you're 50 years old or 40 years old. You may say, hey, mom, dad, I'd do it today. Like, hey, I got this job offer. Should I consider this? There will always be a sounding board, but they're going to have little influence. So it's time to own it now. And the complaining piece, people love to complain. Corporate America does not want a complainer. They don't. They want to know if you complain about something that you can change, it's time to change it. In some situations where, I say I'm 5'10", right? I complain. I'm not 6'4". I can't be a center in basketball. That's just the way I can complain a little bit about being short, right? I have that right. But if there's a circumstance out there for you as a student and you have the ability to change it, change it. Put in the work, do your research, make a pivot, ask the right questions, and make the change. And don't be scared. And don't worry about what other people think. Own that education, own that career path, and really invest in yourself long term because it will pay dividends. And money, not the answer, folks. We're not talking about working hard and making money, and that's happiness. If you chase your passion, the money will follow. Okay? And even if it's not about money, change your passion and your happiness. I love what I do. I love speaking. I can talk about this forever. It doesn't seem like work. Happiness over money, 100% all the time. Quality of life, family, culture, environment. That is the first thing that our candidates ask us about a client. What is the environment? What's the work-life balance, right? What are the people like? It's the happiness, the passion. That goes hand in hand. So don't think this conversation from start to finish today is all about my ability to be successful monetarily. That is not what we're talking about. And you double down on what you're good at. If you want to be a carpenter, you want to be a sole proprietor for yourself, and you want to be a carpenter for the next 40 years, then you do you, and you do it well, and you do it better than anybody else. You make that ketchup better than anybody else. That's the fact here, right? And hey, you know what? If it makes you 30 grand a year and you're happy, then so be it. And don't look to your left and right and think you have to apologize for all the choices that you made. Be happy. And your path will serpentine. No doubt about it. It's not going to be linear. It's not going to be a laser. It's going to go left. It's going to go right. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. You're going to get hit on the head. You're going to fall down. And that's just the reality of life. It's just the reality of career development. And it's what you do with that. And I don't know if we have time. We've been burning through some of this, but there's a video link on the next page, which I love. It's a motivational video. It's 2 minutes long. If you have time, pull it up, run it. But it's a great example of a relationship with a parent and a child and how to kind of push things forward. But I'll leave it with this. A burning desire to be and to do is the starting point from which the dreamer must take off. Dreams are not born out of indifference, laziness, or lack of ambition. And those three words have to resonate with you today. Indifference, just 1 foot in, 1 foot out, not sure, should I go, should I not go, why should I do this? You can ask those questions, but you can't stay in neutral forever. You've got to dedicate yourself to something and go in it wholeheartedly. Laziness, there's just simply no cure for it, right? You got to put in the work. You got to hustle, right? I'll take someone with a head down, great work ethic, who doesn't have the full tool chest today because I know they can ramp up and they'll figure it out. They can operate in that gray. And lack of ambition, again, not monetarily, but just a burning desire to be the best at what you do. That is critical. Regardless of what you decide for yourself, you and your family long term, you really have to be motivated. And you've got to ask yourself, what makes me different, right? What makes me that stock that people want to invest in me? What makes me that person that Bobby wants to call every time he has an opening, right? Mm-hmm. And I think those are tidbits of information that I think students can put in their pocket for tomorrow, but also 40 years from now. And that's where I'll wrap
That
it up.
that is absolutely wonderful. Thank you so very much. I gotta say, I feel empowered and energized and ready to go, even much more. And I know that our students, when they watch this, will feel the exact same way. Thank you once again, Mr. Steiner, for giving up of your time to help impart your wisdom to our students. If they wanted to get in contact with you, how would they be able to do that?
My website, and has my email address on it, Steiner at Steiner Executive Search. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you type in Bobby Steiner, you have direct line of sight to me, or your parents can reach out to me. But Steiner at Steiner Executive Search is my email address. My website is Steiner Executive Search. Contact info is all on there. I have an open door. I'm passionate about this stuff because I think, being realist as we're talking today, it's over embellished sometimes. This is tough work, and that video will go on. You will get beat up by life. You will have your challenges. You'll have to take some risks. Your career will serpentine. Your educational path won't be linear. And I think when you understand that, and understand it's okay, both from a parent perspective and a student perspective, it just lets everybody decompress and say, you know what? It's okay, but we're going to figure this out. And I think that optimism kind of gets me through what I do, but it will get families through some of those tough choices in the academics as well as career progression.
That's awesome. I think that's a great point to end on. Once again, you all, we want to thank Mr. Steiner for being with us. Thank you for spending some time and watching this video. It's Dream December. I'm Eddie Young. Bobby Steiner, once again, thank you, and we'll see you all next time. Goodbye.